Hi, welcome to the Rose at Home channel. I am Rose, I am at home, and I am so incredibly glad that you have decided to join me today when I talk about the amazing reading month that I have had in July. I don't think I've ever had a better reading month. I loved all but one thing that I read this month, and I can't wait to tell you about them. I'm going to talk about them almost in chronological order. To be honest, the only thing I didn't like was the very first thing I read. So if you want to hear me talk about something I didn't like, wait until the very end, stick around, and you can see that one. So the second thing that I read in the month of July was my first Elin Hilderbrand, and that is the Hotel Nantucket. I loved this. I would definitely call this a beach read. The cover gives you the feels that you're gonna get. It is about a young woman who, prior to the start of the book, had a very long-term relationship end. Now she is finding her own self and finding her own happiness. It has multiple perspectives. We meet a lot of the different people who work in the Hotel Nantucket, and we get to follow their storylines. There's a little bit of mystery, there's some intrigue, some characters you don't quite know what's going on. Here's the premise. The young woman in this book has been hired to be the manager of a brand new hotel that has just opened in Nantucket. The British owner of the hotel spared no expense fixing it up in the hopes of getting 5 keys from this anonymous internet reviewer who reviews different hotel and travel destinations every week and has never given 5 keys to any place that they've stayed. There's always been something wrong. So the goal is to impress someone, they have no idea who they are, and get them to give them the 5th key. And everyone at the hotel believes that if they can do it, that the hotel owner would let them stay around and they'd keep their jobs and keep their livelihood and keep this going. So we get to see this through the perspective of multiple employees in this hotel and all of the things that everyone's got going on behind the scenes and the secrets. And I finished this book and I wanted more than anything to go find this hotel and go hang out with these folks because they were all so well drawn and seemed so real. They seemed like people I could go and hang out with. It felt like they were people I did hang out with during the course of this book, and I love that. It's the perfect thing for a beach read, that escape into the lives, the everyday lives of these people in this beautiful setting. And I loved it. I gave it a full 5 stars. I absolutely am going to read more Elin Hilderbrand, but I will be honest, it's gonna wait for summer again because, like I said, it's a perfect beach read, and so I can see every summer having a new Elin Hilderbrand on the TBR. So generally speaking, like I said in my last video, if you haven't had a chance to watch that, go back and see. It's a really good one, but it's how I make my mood read TBR. I absolutely am a mood reader, and one of the things that I really need to do in order to not have to take a break between books is I need to really switch up genre. So that one was light contemporary fiction, and so I followed it with Stay Awake. And again, loved this, but completely different. So the premise of this is that our protagonist, at the very beginning, she wakes up in the back of a cab. She has no idea how she got there. The last thing she remembers is sitting at her desk at work and answering the phone. And then all of a sudden she's in the back of the cab, the time of day is wrong, the clothes are wrong. She has the cabbie take her home. She gets to her house, there are other people living there, and every time she falls asleep, she wakes up with no memory beyond sitting at her desk at work and that phone ringing. It feels like every time she's piecing it together, like you're with her and she's trying to stay up and she's trying to put these pieces together, and then the next thing you know, she feels like she's gonna rest her eyes for a minute, and then all of a sudden it's like blank slate. I was just at work. How did I get here? What's going on? It's such a phenomenal ride to get to go on with her. It's twisty, it's turny. It never felt slow. I never got bored. I was right there with her. I was like, please stay awake. We're getting this together. We're getting this together. Most of her, I'm gonna say almost all, if not all of her leaps in logic seem to make sense. Like it makes sense that she would try this next or go there next, even without remembering anything. But it's so good. The whodunit came out of left field, but was still like, oh no, I can see see that. It made sense and still to me was quite the surprise. I really, really, really loved this. It was so good. I wanted to read this month because Megan Goldin had a new book that came out, and before I picked up the new one, I wanted to read the one that was on my shelf. I'm so glad I did. I'm absolutely gonna check out the rest of her books because I loved this, in case I didn't say that before. Loved, loved, loved. And so the next thing, again, total change of pace, and it was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And again, loved this. So the premise of this is there is an orc from think D&D campaigns. She had been an orc. She had spent her life being the muscle and being the heavy and didn't want that life anymore and was trying desperately to make something new. So she'd saved up, she retired from adventuring, she left her adventuring party, and she buys a livery, which is I guess where you keep horses and take care of horses and things, and she fixes it up to be a coffee shop in a town that does not have coffee. They've not had it, but they've never heard of it before. She had it, it's a gnomish thing, if you know D&D, you know. Gnomes are all sorts of gadgets and newfangled everything, and so we don't get to meet gnomes, but the gnomes play a big part in this book. But it was exactly how it's described. It was absolutely a cozy fantasy. Are there high stakes for the characters? Yes. Stuff happens. It's not like it's plotless. It absolutely has a plot. There are things that happen to Viv and to the characters in the book. There are obstacles that she has to overcome. There are things she has to figure out. But whereas in most fantasy, the problems are global and epic and you have to save the whole world, she's just trying to sell some coffee and have some friends and change her life. And so the stakes are high for her, but they're not the kind of fantasy stakes that we're used to. So that's what makes it a cozy fantasy. It was so much fun. The one thing that fell down in this for me is because there were lots of different kind of species of people. They're called races, but they're not like races like human. There's somebody who's a hob, but they weren't clear if that was a hobbit or a hobgoblin. There's something who was a ratkin, and I wasn't quite sure what that looked like. And the description and things when I Googled online the little bit of description and the things when I Googled online didn't quite match up. And so I wish there had been a little bit more description as far as the characters, especially those of different species. But other than that, this was fun. It was light. It was a good kind of refreshing, fun, cozy fantasy, and I'm so glad I read it. Highly, highly recommend Legends and Lattes when you're in the mood for that light fantasy moment. This is it. And now something that's nowhere near as light, and that is How to Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes. This ended up being a 5-star, but it took it a minute. It's not quite at least it's not what I thought it was. I don't know if it would be what you thought it was. It's not a page turner. It's not fast. It starts out really slow. The issue that I had at the beginning, and it took me a minute to get into it, the writing is the best word I can think of is clever. The writing is very clever. The writing is very amused with itself, if that makes sense. So once I kind of got over that, well, okay, so what happened at the beginning is it was so much about the word choice and the phrase choice that I'm reading and I'm reading and I'm reading and I'm like, are we ever going to get to a plot, or is this just clever writing? And then I realized, oh, hold on. I think the plot already started and I missed it because I was focusing so much on how cute these turns of phrases are. And so once I actually realized, oh, this is the plot, I was fine. The failing, I think there was on me because I was focusing in the wrong place. But if you enjoy super clever writing, if you enjoy writing that really likes itself, you will love it. And once I got to the place where I could kind of let that go and actually focus on the characters, enjoyed it. So the premise of this is that there is a school for folks who want to be really good at committing murder. And murdering your employer is just one type that they teach, and the title of the book is the title of one of the textbooks that the characters in the book use. So the story follows 3 different characters who were at the school at that time. One of them is a young man, and I can't tell you what he looked like because his name was Iverson. And I taught a student named Iverson last year. So as soon as, well, his first name was Cliff, but it was Cliff Iverson. And as soon as they said Iverson, his head, immediately his face, it was Iverson. So the whole book, if I taught you and you know Iverson, that's who I saw the entire thing for that part. I couldn't even tell you what the description says because it didn't matter to me. It was Iverson. But anyway, Cliff Iverson, whose boss is an absolute horrid human being. He caused at least 2 suicides. He changed schematics on an airplane to save money that would end up being deadly in actual practice. The book does a good job at making you think, yeah, this guy's gotta go, because that nobody listens. He finds a way to discredit anyone who might possibly say anything against him so that no one will listen when they say, hey, this stuff is dangerous, what he's done here is dangerous. So he is pretty much your main character that we're following. We're also following a young woman who is being blackmailed by a coworker, and then a Hollywood A-list star, and she ticked off a studio head. This happens back in the 40s when you sign to a specific studio, and so he's refusing to give her any actual good parts, and she's contracted to him for like 6 years, so there's no chance of he's basically killing her career, and so she is absolutely stuck unless she can somehow get rid of him. So those are your 3 characters that we're following. We get a lot of the kind of school stuff and all of that. I really enjoyed this after I figured out that the plot had already started without me. And then I read my favorite book probably of the year, and I've read some good ones this year. Y'all, I loved this. Oh my gosh, did I love this. I loved this. This was practically written for me. I know everyone and their brother is talking about this and has been reading this, and I have the first edition with the sprayed edges. It sold out forever ago. Second edition without sprayed edges had been sold out. It's kind of cool now to say you didn't like it so you can be different. I'm not different. I loved it. Loved it. Cannot wait for the next one. This is genre. This is adult fantasy. It is the story of a young woman named Violet. She has spent her entire life studying to become a scribe. In their society, you get to pick one of 4. Think of it, she's 20 at the start of this, and she's the youngest, if not one of the youngest people who are there. So consider this to be like a grad school kind of thing. She's already been through regular school. She's been doing all the training with the scribes up until the age of 20. And then 6 months before they have to pick where their final studies are going to be for their master's or their doctorate, if we're going to equate it to nowadays, her mother tells her that under no uncertain terms is she going to be a scribe. She is going to be a dragon rider. Dragon riding is incredibly dangerous, and so the school for dragon riding is also incredibly dangerous. They don't want you to somehow be able to damage or put a dragon into a situation where they can get hurt if you can't handle it. Because she's very small, her mother was very ill when she was pregnant with her, so she's very small. She has very loose tendons and ligaments, so she sprains things easily. She falls down easily, and she's tiny. So it's not nobody thinks that she can survive this. So she is, at the beginning of this story, positive her mother is looking to kill her, basically. My mother wants me dead. There makes no other sense that she's forcing me. But because her mother is like a general. She's super high up over everybody in their kingdom. Her mother could go into the Scribe. If she tried to just go to the Scribe, she could take her out and force her into the Dragon Riders. So there's no escaping. There's no saying, well, I'm just going to leave home and go do this. She's stuck. It follows her through all of the trials and tribulations of the school. She already knows she's got a target on her back because she's the general's kid. If you can take out the general's kid, how cool are you going to be? She's got to deal with the training being dangerous. She's got to deal with the other people there being dangerous. It was such an adventure and such a ride. And this is probably the first thing this year that I got to the last page and I was mad at myself that I read it so fast. And all I wanted to do was turn it back over, go back to the first page and get back into that world. That's how well done this is. And that's how much fun I had in this. So don't listen to the cool kids who are like now trying to say I'm too cool to like what other people like. It's that good. It really is. If you like then this is fantasy high stakes. If you like high stakes fantasy, you like adult fantasy, you like those school training program fantasies, you like dragons and all of that kind of stuff. I'm trying to like not do spoilers. If you like that kind of thing, this is beyond super well done, and I think that you would really, really like it. So I felt super bad for any book that was going to follow this, and it took me a hot minute to get into it, but once I did, I really enjoyed it. So again, I have to read something that's very, very different or I can't get into it. So I went with my first Christina Lauren, The Unhoneymooners. It took, like I said, it took me a minute at the beginning to get more into this type of style after having been, I'm reaching for it, it's right here, I want to pet it, after having been in the world of the Fourth Wing. But once I did, I really enjoyed this. You know some of my things with romance. I don't like when it doesn't make sense why they didn't like each other. It totally makes sense why they don't like each other at the beginning of this. I don't like when people are inappropriate and there are no ramifications for that. That does not happen in this book. It's mostly fade to black with the intimacy scenes, so I tend to skim those in romances. It's just not my like, I don't mind them. It doesn't stop me from reading it, but if it gets long and gratuitous, I just kind of skim. I didn't have to with this. I'm not saying that there's none, but I'm saying minimal. It just worked really well. I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed our main couple. They were great. I enjoyed them figuring things out. It did get a little draggy at parts where I just kind of wanted will you just sit down and have a conversation? If you will sit down and have a conversation, you can fix all of this right now. But I understand why they didn't. It's in there, so I'm not going to give spoilers. And it was really sweet, and it was really fun, and it was really light. It's not a change your world kind of book. It's not a I want to crawl back in this world with them kind of book. But now if there were a sequel with them doing other things or other characters in this world doing things, I would totally read that. It's rare that I enjoy a romance this much. I haven't enjoyed one like this in a while, and so I totally gave it 5 stars because this was so much fun. And then the last thing I read for this month, I picked up Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. And this was great. Yes, it's a mystery, kind of thriller-esque, but it also has a sci-fi-ish element to it. At the very start of the book, we have our main character. She's looking out the window waiting for her 18-year-old son to get home. She sees him walking up the road to the house, and another man starts coming from another direction, and she watches her son kill this guy. And she runs out there, she tries to stop it. He gets arrested. They go to the police station. It's all of this. The police keep her son. She didn't even know who that other guy was. She didn't know what was going on. She gets home. She manages to fall asleep, and she wakes up, and it's the day before. And so each time she wakes up, time rewinds, and she's got all of these days to go back. It got a little dragging in the middle, like the very beginning, super exciting, page turning, and then I was like, okay, can we, and then, but it was like being on that roller coaster, and so there was that part where we were at the top, and I was like, okay, can we keep going? And then all of a sudden it went whoosh, and we're down that other side, and we're starting to get puzzle pieces left, right, and center, and it just was moving so fast while still being really, really well crafted. And so this was great. I think I read this in like a day or two. Like I couldn't put it down. And then I was like, oh, I don't know. And then whoosh, absolutely just stayed up and just read and read, because it's really well done. It's super well crafted. Why it's happening does make sense in the world of the story. It all is just, everything's tied together super well. I absolutely want to read more from this author because she can craft mysteries with a supernatural kind of element to it this well. I can't wait to see what else she's got out there. And now we're to the thing I read that I didn't care for. I think I gave it 3 stars. It is called Hunter's Green. It's by Phyllis A. Whitney. I wouldn't have picked this up myself. This was for July Mystery Book Club, but it's not really a mystery. It is a gothic. I think it wanted to be a gothic romance, but it didn't quite get there. When I was in college, in one of my writing classes, I had a professor who explained that your protagonist is the person who is given the opportunity for change. They don't have to take it, but they have to be given that opportunity. The thing is, nobody's really given an opportunity for change here. There's stuff that happens. Everybody's the same at the end as they were at the beginning, and that's not just because they refused to be any different. They just weren't. It just didn't. It really didn't work for me. The more other gothic pieces I read, the more I appreciate Rebecca, because Rebecca is a classic. It is so well done. And when I see others that I'm like, oh, you wanted to be there, but you weren't. The whole plot of this, there was a young American woman who had left her husband 3 years earlier. She had met him when she was visiting the English village where her grandmother had lived as a child, and whirlwind romance, and she's married within like a few weeks, and they're married for a year or maybe 2. Then she ends up running off and leaving him, and then she decides at 22 she is all grown up and she can go back and fix their marriage. She goes back to this big gothic mansion, and everything is stodgy and old, and there's all this kind of weird stuff going on. It is what it is. It's naive young girl, older ex-husband in her case, giant manor house, people there who don't want her there, spooky, creepy stuff going on. So if all of those elements of a gothic novel are there, so if that does it for you, then you might like this. I think that there are others that have done that better. So that was it. That was my absolute best reading month that I have probably ever had in my life, with the one exception. Everything was so much fun. Everything was a grand adventure. And I'm so glad I can talk to you about them. If you have read any of these books, give me a comment down below. Tell me what you thought, especially if you loved them as much as I do, because I love sharing the gush with other people who also want to gush about things. I hope if you're not already subscribed, you'll go ahead and hit that button and subscribe, or so you can see me and we can talk books twice a week while I'm back in my classroom. And in the meantime, I hope you're having an absolutely amazing rest of your week, and I hope you get to read some really great books. Bye, y'all.